Hey everyone, Gabe Alves here. I am with Remax Metro. I'm a local agent, and I'm here with Bobby Poth.
I'm Bobby Poth. I am a real estate agent here in St. Pete with Mainframe Real Estate. I got my broker's license quite a while ago. Taught for quite a few years here in Florida for one of the largest real estate schools, and I co-own Elite Real Estate Academy with Manuela Hendrickson. And yeah, that's my passion, is really, real estate and teaching.
And we are going to talk about something that everybody's talking about, that is this whole new thing with the condo rules. And then let's just share a little bit with us what has changed since, like, we know about the condo that collapsed in Sunrise, Florida. And after that, a lot of things have changed. So just give us a little bit of background.
Yeah, so we have, a lot of condos in Florida. A lot of people have fears now because of the collapse of that building, and that was because of structural issues. So last year, the Florida legislature passed a new law that requires that condos do some inspections to make sure that, they're catching things before we have an accident like that.
Okay. And then there is a lot of talks about, I think a lot of real estate agents are freaking out, thinking like the world is going to end. Yep. So what are some big things that are like us as real estate agents and also the consumer that should be looking for when thinking about buying a condo?
Yeah, so the sky is not falling like people keep thinking.
Yeah.
The law is actually a really good thing for buyers. It's just really new, so we're trying to navigate it. And what the law is requiring and what buyers should be looking for is that condo buildings that are a certain age have what's called a milestone inspection report done.
Okay.
And that's to check for the structural integrity of the building to see if there's any structural deterioration. And if there is, then they have to do a second phase of that and repair that. So what's really good is if I were a buyer 2 years ago buying a condo building, I wouldn't know if there's structural issues unless that report had been done and that study had been done, and often it hasn't. So now that they have to do them, if they're at a certain age by the end of next year, then as a buyer, as a consumer, I at least know that the building I'm buying in, whether it had structural issues or it didn't. So it's really a good thing for the consumer.
So like when we you said about the milestone inspection. So everybody thinks like, oh, it's just an inspection, but this milestone inspection involves a lot, right?
It did. So the law that was created has two components. One is regarding the inspection, and then one is regarding the reserves for things like structural issues. So the first component requires that buildings that are of a certain age, so any buildings built prior to 1992 must do this report must do this inspection by the end of 2024.
Okay.
And then every 10 years after that.
Okay.
If they are within 3 miles of the coast, then when they hit 25 years, they have to do it, and then every 10 years. And if they are at least 3 miles or further, then it's when they hit 30 years, and every 10 years after that. And this isn't just like a general home inspection. This is a inspection that has to be done by a licensed engineer or architect, and they're looking to see if there's any deterioration structurally with the building. They're not looking for cosmetic things. They're looking for structural issues that could cause a collapse. Yeah, like what we saw in
to avoid that. So the reality is, because all the condos will have the 3 stories and above. We'll have until the end of 2024 to get this inspection done, correct?
Right.
So from now until 2024, are there any condos that have done already that inspection?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah.
I know that I heard that some of the smaller buildings around Pinellas County have done it.
Okay.
But I would imagine those are much easier to do if you're 3 stories or 4 stories versus 40 stories.
Okay.
A lot of the newer builds that we have in downtown St. Pete don't have to do them. Okay. So they are not at that point yet. Now, the caveat to that is that if a local building official, if the city came in and tells the building that they have to do it, then the law applies to them regardless of their age. Okay. So the city could come in and tell buildings that they need to do it. I haven't heard that that's going to happen. But things for buyers to think about is, one, this is a good thing for them. Yeah. Because at least they're going to know what they're buying into. Yeah. Where I would be concerned is, because this doesn't have to be done until 2024, buying in a building that is required to do it, but that hasn't done the inspection yet, We don't know what the cost of these inspections might be. They could be extremely expensive. I would imagine that they're not cheap, and that's going to get passed on to the property owners.
Okay.
If it discovers and uncovers structural issues, then phase 2 of that inspection is going to require that they do those repairs, and that money has to come from somewhere. The law does allow that if the association's governing documents allow them to borrow money from a bank, that they could do that if they can qualify, or they can pull from their reserves, or it's going to have to come from somewhere, and that's usually in the form of a special assessment.
Okay.
So if I'm a buyer buying now, and that report happens 3 months from now and it discovers stuff, I'm going to be on the hook for that.
Yeah,
so that's where I would be concerned with a buyer buying in a building that's required to do them that hasn't done it yet.
Yeah. So like we were talking about Bayfront Tower. Just share a little bit, like what do you, like using Bayfront Tower as an example of what's going on.
Bayfront is a perfect example because it was built within the time period that it's going to be required to do this inspection. I mean, some good things, it hasn't collapsed.
It's been there for a long time.
Yeah, they haven't had a ton of issues.
Yeah.
So you're probably in good shape there, but if they haven't done that report, then when they do that report, we'll know. So if I'm a buyer buying now and it hasn't been done, that could be something that's of concern because it does fit all those requirements to be done.
So like if you're a buyer and you're looking to buy a condo, so if you buy something that's built 1992 on, that's a good thing because those people are not going to be required to do the inspection by the end of only when they hit 25 years, right?
Yeah, once you hit 25 years or 30 years, depending on where you're located, then you'll have to do it every 10 years.
Every 10 years.
And here's the thing is that the board is not exempt from having to do this. So the condominium association cannot exempt themselves in any way from doing it.
Yeah.
The other side of that is that they also have to do what's called a SIR study, a structural integrity repair study. So in addition to the actual inspection, they also have to have an audit done of their reserves. And in the past, associations could pull from their reserves if their governing documents allowed them to cover shortfalls in their budget. The law now requires them to maintain those reserves. They can't pull from them when it's structural things.
Okay.
So if they have to balance the budget, that could increase assessments too.
Yeah.
It's too early to really see how it's going to shake out for condo owners, but...
So we hate to see that because we like the ideal thing is like to wait until you buy. Like if you're buying a condo in a high rise that has not done the study and all this stuff, the idea is to kind of wait to see where it's going to land, right?
Right. Now, if you think about it this way, say you bought in a building that was only 15 years old. You're 10 years from having to do the first study.
Yeah.
In theory. So what's the difference between buying today and buying 2 years ago? I mean, if you were going to buy then, why wouldn't you buy now? Except that 10 years from now, you'll have to do that study, and if it uncovers something, there's a cost associated with that. Yeah. But from a safety standpoint, that's not a bad thing.
Yeah, but then like if you're looking to buy now, just in planning expenses, it wouldn't be the ideal thing to buy in a condo that that by 2024. It's a horrible thing for me to say that because I'm a real estate agent,
right.
And I want people to buy. But we want to do what's best for the people too.
But it's not a horrible thing, and here's why. And I will totally get on my soapbox with this. So, when this law came into place, Florida Realtors created an amendment to our condo disclosure. And it's a small portion at the very bottom of it. And the condo disclosure is very generic anyways. And all it does is inform the buyer that they have a right to have a copy of this inspection if it's been done. That's all it does.
Yeah.
Nothing in any documents a buyer's going to get when they're buying a condo discloses to them that this is what the law says, this has to be done, how that's going to get paid for, and if they could have to absorb a cost of that. It doesn't alert them to the fact that if the building has structural issues, that could get passed on in the form of a special assessment. None of that.
Yeah.
So without agents, without realtors being proactive and informing consumers, they're not going to know. They're going to buy in there, and we just taught a class on this called Is My Condo a Hot Potato? I mean, imagine being the realtor who sold a condo to a buyer that 2 years from now calls you up and says, Gabe, I just got hit with a $25,000 assessment because this building has structural issues. I didn't know that this was going to happen. How do you explain that?
Be there.
If you knew that it was a potential. I don't want to be the agent.
I don't want to be that agent. Yeah.
I'd rather be proactive.
And I think and then it's up we need to give them all the information that's available,
right,
all the risk possible, and then they are the ones that are going to make the informed decision. Our job is to give them as much information as possible, and then at the end of the day, it's their decision if they're going to take on that risk or not.
Exactly.
But to take on a risk without knowing there was a risk, I don't want to be in that position. I want my clients to be like, remember, your property taxes are going to go higher.
Exactly.
After you might double because of it's just and they were like, oh, I'm okay. It's less than an impact. They still call me and it's like, my taxes,
right,
I told you, But it's something that we just need to, because for my American mother, Marianne, she's been asking, I don't know if I should buy a condo, and we are saying, and she lives she's retired, fixed income, there is no 25 grand showing up when she needs.
Right.
And then it's part of me is yeah, it might be, it's too much of a risk for somebody like her, for somebody that's, it's still on the prime of their career. They're going to be making more money in 10 years than now. Then it's a different story. But it was somebody that has to have
Now, there are things that buyers can do to be proactive and still buy in a condo if these inspections haven't been done. You think about the building that collapsed, that caused, that was the catalyst for this law to come into place. If you look at the history of that, board after board after board neglected to not just fund things properly, but there was deferred maintenance. There were issues that were known that weren't addressed. Most condo associations in Florida are not doing that. They're fixing things when they need to be fixed. We've seen it with our downtown condos here. Signature had stucco repair issues, and they addressed that. Most of the time, the board members also have an investment in, they own a condo too. They're not just going to neglect things. The buildings I would probably be most concerned about are going to be, any high rises that are in areas where, they're operating as short-term rentals. If you look at these condo hotels, they often don't fund reserves. And the reason being is that if I own it for 3 years and I'm turning income, I don't want to fund reserves so that the next owner is protected. Let that be the next owner's problem, which is why it's difficult to get financing in them sometimes. Those would be the buildings I think are probably more ripe for issues and neglect.
And that's so if we can give people 5 things to look for when you're buying a condo. I think you gave already an example. It's maybe it's a good idea to look at if it's one that has no rental limitations. There's short-term rental, condo hotels, but just throw some of those 5 things that you think
the first thing as a buyer I'd look for is whether or not it meets the criteria for having to do the milestone inspection report. Have they done it? That's the first thing I'm going to look for. The second thing is whether or not they're required to fund reserves for structural issues. Are they funding their reserves properly? But we've been advising buyers to look at this for years anyways. Looking at those financials to see that. 2 is to look at, the past 3 years of financials and see where is that money going? Are they routinely making repairs to the building? And what are those repairs? Are they, hand that to my home inspector and ask the home inspector, does this look like these repairs could be indicative of structural issues? Or are these just ongoing maintenance issues? That could be your red flag right there. The third thing would be, looking to see, is the building desirable, and I always think of resale value, right? And I have no emotional attachment to real estate. So I always, tell buyers, think about the things that bother you about it today, whether it's a busy road or you can't add a bathroom, are the things that are gonna, be a concern to a future buyer when we sell your property. So, how right now, since, the studies don't have to be done until 2024, are we seeing sales slow in the building because of buyers being nervous?
Yeah.
You know, if so, is that a risk I want to take? Or is it a building that's popular enough that people don't care? Because
Yeah.
I'm going to think about, you know, if it is a hot potato and I have to dump it, how easy is it going to be to do that?
Yeah.
You know, and then the fifth thing is going to be, you know, the age-old question, do I want to live there and is it worth it for me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because the reality is buyers are coming to Florida in droves.
Yeah.
Our market is still, here in St. Pete especially, one of the strongest in the country. We're busier than ever, and buyers are still coming here with cash, and they're going to continue to buy whether the condo has a special assessment or not.
Yeah. So it's like, I think one of the things like that you said the most, it's even looking like if you're not in St. Pete, but if you go to the beach, just by walking into some of those buildings on the beach, you're like, how is this thing still standing? So I think that's like just by your look at the building and then being a condo hotel and just the traffic of people coming and going, there is not that pride of ownership on
Right.
places like that. But if you go to places like in downtown, even Bayfront Tower and the Signature, people have invested a lot of money, their personal money to have a unit there, and they don't want to see that place just falling apart.
And it's no different than, you know, if I have two homes, single family homes side by side,
Yeah.
one the person's lived in for 30 years and raised their family and taken pride in it. The other, they've had a different tenant every single year.
They don't.
One's being operated simply for profit. They're
Yeah.
not going to maintain it at the same level that that person who's lived there for 30 years
Yes.
is going to. And it's no different. You know,
And those things is like, because people forget, like even if you own a single family home, you might like 10 years from now,
Yeah.
something might happen in your house that you might not have to address.
Right.
Do you have the pipes, like the plumbing that would need to be replaced? And those things come up. So in a way to decrease a little bit of the anxiety is just explain that's like the same way that works in your home is going to work even more now because
and the risk for buying in a condo was no different 3 years ago than it is today, than it will be 5 years from now. The reality is that if the building has issues, money has to come from somewhere.
Yeah.
It's often in the form of a special assessment. The condo owners 100% of the time are the ones paying it, whether it's through a loan, special assessments, an increase in monthly assessments, they're always the ones responsible. That hasn't changed at all. The only thing that has changed is that the law in Florida is now requiring that some of these buildings do a structural inspection that might uncover these issues and should uncover these issues, and that it requires that they be addressed.
Yeah.
It's the only thing that has changed. And so from my perspective, from a buyer, especially people buying after they've been done, that's a really good thing because you're buying with more knowledge than you had a few years ago.
And then now you kind of feel also like people have a freak out about government and rules and regulations, but those things are also put in place to protect us.
Yeah.
So in a way, it's not a terrible thing. We just want to prevent something horrible that happened in Sunrise, Florida, to happen again here. So.
When this law, went into effect, and before we started, really discussing it, I reached out to a law firm here in St. Pete that represents condo associations throughout the state of Florida, and they gave me a copy of the letter that they sent to all of their clients. And what they said in this letter was outlines it really, really well, and how they're advising them not to wait until October or November of next year to do this, but to start doing it now and get procedures in place to fund these reserves. So I have a feeling that, we're in April right now. I have a feeling over the next few months, we're going to start seeing these associations really start jumping on getting these inspections done. Which to me really excites me, selling here in St. Pete. You do quite a bit of condos, and now you're going to be able to walk into these buildings with more information for your buyer.
Yes.
Sadly, most real estate agents don't know about.
Yeah, and then I think this is what it's important, not just for us agents, super important for us agents because we are the channel that's going to educate our clients, but also to have the information because as we know, people have all sorts of opinions, and then the stories start getting more embellished, and then you're like, everybody's gonna die,
Yep.
and then it's not as crazy, and then if it's a building that is not good, and then you know that, and you can
Right.
see it, don't buy it there. There's other better buildings to buy. Well, thank you so much
Yeah.
for chatting with us.